Okay, this is our last section, 12.8, half-angle formulas. These are the last three formulas you have to memorize. If you notice something about them, the sine, the cosine, and the tangent, pretty much all the same. The only difference is sine has a negative, cosine has a positive, and then tangent makes sense. We took the sine and put it over the cosine. So once again, this is not about you having to understand where these formulas came from. That's pre-calc. All you need to do is figure out how to manipulate and use the formulas. So take the time to pause the video right here and add these last three formulas to your formula sheet. All right, here's our first question that we'll be asked to work with. Find the exact value of the tangent of 135, but they want us to use tangent 1/2, 270. First word that should pop out is exact value. That means no decimals that run on forever and ever. It's going to have some kind of radical probably involved. All right, so since they want me to use the tangent 1/2 formula, it's the first thing I'm going to write down. I'm going to write down the formula. Next thing I'm going to do is they wanted me to put in 270 in for my angle. So every time I see A, notice I put in 270. So all I have to do now is go to my calculator and take the cosine of 270. And when you find out, when you take the cosine of 270, you get a lovely number. You get 0. Oh, this is turning out to be fabulous, because 1 minus 0 is 1, and 1 plus 0 is 1, and then I have to take the square root of 1, and now my only decision is it a plus 1 or is it a minus 1? Well, this was the angle they wanted me to do. They wanted me to do the tangent of 135. And if I go back to my lovely unit circle, 135 is in the second quadrant. And in the second quadrant, tangent is negative. So therefore, my final answer is a -1. Now you're saying, why couldn't I just have typed that into my calculator? Why couldn't I have just typed the tangent of 135, pressed enter, and -1 would come up? You're absolutely right, but that's not the point. The point is, can you manipulate and work the formula? All right, on to the little more aggressive example 2. They're telling me, as I read this problem, that the cosine of A is a -1/2. That means every time I see the cosine of A, I'm going to replace it with a -1/2. And then they give me a little more information here. They tell me that my original angle A is over here between 180 and 270. So I know if I were to fill in this triangle, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. What do they want me to do? They want me to find the cosine of half of that angle. Now, we don't know what the angle is, but once we find it, we want to take half of it. All right, so that tells me which formula I'm going to use. I'm going to use the cosine of a half angle. And once again, this is lovely, because every time I see the cosine of A, I just replace it with a -1/2. So there it is. I just replaced the cosine of A with a -1/2. And this makes it really easy. 1 plus -1/2. Well, that's 1/2. And now remember, what they're asking me to do here is take half of a half. Mr. Allenwick, how do you take half of a fraction? That's right, double the denominator. So now I want to take the square root of 1/4. That's pretty easy to do. Leaves me with 1/2. But once again, the trickiest part here, is it a negative 1/2? Or is it a positive 1/2? And that's where this quadrant information is used. See, we used this part of the problem. We used this part of the problem. How is this information used? Well, if A is in quadrant 3, then where would half of A be? Well, I'm just going to do the math. I was in quadrant 3, which is between 180 and 270. Well, half of 180 brings me to 90, and half of 270 brings me to 135. So this is where this half angle is. It's in between 90 and 135. Well, who cares? We don't want to know the angle specifically. We just want to know what quadrant it's in. It's in quadrant 2. Oh, quadrant 2 again. Sine is positive, therefore cosine is negative. So I can come over here and I can say my final answer is the cosine of this half angle is negative 1/2. Let's try one more. This says the sine of an angle is negative 24 over 25. And again, we're starting off in quadrant 3. Well, since I'm going to do half angle, I'm going to take this, I'm going to divide this by 2, I'm going to divide this by 2, and I'm going to divide this by 2, and once again we ended up in quadrant 2. So I know my final answer is going to carry the sign of whatever happens in quadrant 2. But we're beginning in quadrant 3, and they told me the sign is negative 24 over 25. So into my little triangle, I'll put my opposite side and my hypotenuse. And you know why we got to do that? Because right here. Because in order to do all these formulas, we need to know the cosine of the angle. They gave us the sine of the angle. So that means a little Pythagorean theorem here. 25 squared equals negative 24 squared plus a squared. And when we do all the math out, we realize that a is 7. So this side over here is 7. And then it's negative 7 because we went in the negative direction. Again, all this should be review. So now let's just put it all in there. If I put in negative 7 over 25, right, that's what the cosine is. The cosine is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. The rest should be pretty simple math to deal with. And right here, to make life easier, 32 over 18 does reduce to 16 over 9, and we like that because we can take the square root of 16 over 9 very quickly and get 4 over 3. Now the only thing we're deciding is it positive or is it negative? Let's see. We've done the sine, we've done this. Oh, right here, that's what we did right in the beginning. We're in quadrant 2. And in quadrant 2, tangent is negative.